Hey guys, it's Alus. Welcome back to my channel. This is a bit of a different video because I am adding commentary for the first time to my video. This is a job that I'm doing for Soccer Paradise FC, in which I had to create a Instagram flyer for their announcement in the US Open Cup. I didn't want to just leave it without any commentary. I wanted to guide you guys through my design process so you can see what it is that I'm doing. And yeah, let's get to it. So I start off by making a 180 by 180 document, and then I go straight into Google to look for the US Open Cup trophy. I try to find the best quality image that I can and copy it and then paste it straight into my document file. Then I use a combination of the lasso tool and the brush tool to mask out the remaining parts of the image that I don't want. Then we go back into Google to look for a good PNG image of the US Open Cup logo, because I don't like the way that it looks on the photo, so I'm gonna replace it, and you're gonna see in a little bit how it is that I do it. As you can see, I start off by trying to use the pen tool, and I honestly have no idea why I did that. Then I use the lasso tool and do a content-aware fill to cover the remaining part of that box red. And then I use the perspective warp on the same layer that I have the logo to kind of match it to the box's perspective. And you can see me moving it around, kind of making sure that everything's good. And here you're going to see that I go into a pre-made file that I have pre-made cutouts of players. And then I go into one of my graphic design asset folders to look for one of my grunge textures. And I want to try to match it, change the color up, see if I can get a nice orange color to go with the team's colors, because after all, the team's colors are orange and white. And it took me a while. I tried some hue and saturation adjustment layers. Nothing was working until I decided to just bring the saturation completely down on the original image and do a solid color adjustment layer over that and put it to the orange that I liked, and that seemed to do the trick. And then you can see here that I used just some basic brushes to kind of make so it wouldn't be so harsh on the, I guess you could say, like the gradient from the white to the orange, to kind of mix them up and make it a little bit more grungy. And now you can see that I start to pick and choose which players and coaches I want to put in which position. I kind of had like an idea of where I wanted each player to go already, so I went straight into it. But then you'll see that I do change them around a bit, because I don't like the way the composition is looking too much. It's important to first get the idea of composition and kind of arrange everything before you go into adding details or shadows and highlights. At least in my experience, I find it a lot easier for my workflow. It's a lot easier to do that than to try and shade everything and then not working out and having to delete it in the first place, you know? So then here I realized that I was short a few players, so I go into some of the images that I have in folder, and I just use the quick selection to kind of select the subject. It's been working pretty well. If not, I usually have to touch it up a bit with the lasso tool to mask them out. But I go in there and I just do that really fast and just fit them in the composition. So now that I've finished kind of the layout of the composition, you can see that I start to go into each individual player and kind of adjust everything so it looks like they're all the same color and environment. I boost up the textures and the clarity a bit on each one to get a little bit more textures in each player's face and the folds in the fabric. And you're going to see that I'm going to start to mask out parts of the players that I don't want in the composition, and you'll see how it is that I do it. It's pretty simple. Just use any brush, soft brush that you have. I'm pretty sure I went with the basic one and just kind of mask it out so it's not so harsh. After masking everything out, I realized that they were too high up in the composition, so I get everything and I put it down. But to be able to do that, I see that the trophy podium, the logo needs to be a little bit higher up, so I go into the smart object and I use the content aware fill again to fix that and move the trophy down a bit more so that I can move everything else down. I noticed that the white background just looks too plain, so I go into Google again and I search up Open Cup Final field, and I think the 2019 field showed up, so I used that, brought it in, desaturated it, then used the layer mask to blend it in again and lowered the opacity. And then you can see here that I didn't really like the vibrance of the orange, so I went into the smart object of the orange grunge texture and brightened it up a bit. To add some separation, I go in with a new layer behind each couple sets of rows of players with a white brush that's just a basic brush. I think it's in the basic textures pack, and I start to break it up a little bit with adding white in between layers so that the players can kind of separate off of each other and all the orange doesn't mix in. And same thing goes for the white shirts. Then I realized that I forgot to add a camera raw filter to the trophy itself, and I add a little bit of vibrance to it to kind of match the orange tones of the overall composition. I typically don't do this first, but I went ahead and got a soft brush on orange, any orange color, and outlined every single player to add kind of like a backdrop type of light. It's very subtle in the overall image, but you'll end up seeing that it does help with all the players individually. And then I also go into the trophy and do the same thing. The outer edges kind of give it like this nice shine, like as if the grunge texture in the background is reflecting off the trophy. And it's really subtle, but it really adds to the final image. And now comes the fun part. I make a new layer and I do a 50% gray fill, set it to overlay, and then use the dodge and burn tools to add shadows and highlights that are subtle, but you could still see a difference, and it adds to the overall image and composition as opposed to just leaving them blank. And you're going to see that I do that with every single player one by one. Sometimes I might do less, sometimes I might do more, depending on how much light and shadows those players already have naturally. then finally, I do the same thing for the trophy. I really like how this trophy turns out. You could really see how the shine and the shadows and the reflections pop out when you do add a little bit of that layer burn and dodge on it. And I do the same thing, I think, for the podium part, but just slightly, not too much. So then I grab the logo and put it behind everything, and I don't like how it looks, so I just keep it back on the bottom left corner, and I have to add the text, which is pretty simple, just the 2024 US Open Cup qualifiers. I don't like how simple it looks on the bottom left, so I put it on the top in the middle, and I still don't like how simple it looks, so I take it into Illustrator, and I want to make it kind of 3D. So to do that, I type it out, I warp it with an arc, make 3 copies, then 2 of those copies I blend them together with like 40 steps, and I put the 3rd copy on top, and that kind of creates a 3D effect on the text. I don't like how it turns out though, so I do it again, and this time around I make the blended part a little bit smaller so that it has more of a, like, it's popping out towards you, and you'll see here that I combine it and it looks a little better, so I go ahead and put it into Photoshop, and I like it a lot more. So then to add some grain to the text, I make a new layer. I use Shift Backspace to do a 50% gray fill. And then I go into the Filters tab. I do the Pixelate and Pointillize at 3. I set that to Overlay. I make sure that I do a black and white adjustment, and then I clip it onto the text to make sure that it's just on the text. Then here in a new layer, I use the soft brush to make just a dot, and then I use a free transform to squish it up. I use a motion blur to elongate it, then I multiply it, or I duplicate it a bunch of times and kind of get like a little shining star effect so that I can put it on the trophy to kind of add those accents where there's shine. I mean, you could put it basically anywhere, but I like to put it where there's shine. Then I go back into Google and look up some Ember Sparks copyright free, and I set the layer to screen, and I put them on each side of the image, kind of add some more textures. And then I do the same thing for some smoke. I grab the smoke clouds and I kind of just put them on each side, add a little bit more depth to the image. And then I use the free transform warp to kind of change it up and move it a little bit to fit my composition. So after that, I select all the layers, I duplicate them, and I merge them together. And then in that merged layer, I go into the camera raw filter and add some final tweaks to the highlights and the shadows, the whites, the blacks, the texture clarity. And basically after that, I'm done. And this is the final result of the image. And there you have it, guys. That's how I made this soccer flyer in a little bit under 2 hours. If you found this video helpful and easy to follow along, make sure you leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. I'll catch you in the next one.